My sister thought grief made me weak and vulnerable, so I showed her what it actually made me. My sister is a corrupt CPS worker. For as long as I can remember, she's abused her power to help her friends. Didn't matter if the home was neglectful or downright abusive. If the parent was someone she was on good terms with, she'd request a check off them, then turn a blind eye to whatever was going on and declare the home safe. It was really horrible. And about a year ago, I experienced it myself. I was a single mother to a 4-month-old baby, and my husband's funeral had only happened 2 weeks ago when my sister popped by for a wellness check. She had Claire, her infertile best friend, with her. They exchanged knowing looks at my door. I asked them what was going on and why they were here, and my sister told me it was just to make sure I'm not letting grief stop me from caring for my baby. She walked around the house noting down dishes in the sink and documented my daughter crying because her nappy, that I was about to change, was full. Claire even had the audacity to ask to hold my daughter. "I'll never have children of my own," she said in this sad, almost teary voice. They ended up leaving with my sister telling me she'll be back, saying she was sorry, but this house needed another inspection. Sure enough, a week later, I was feeding my daughter while holding my husband's photo when my sister appeared with Claire again. I asked her why Claire was here, and she told me she just ran into her, and because Claire just loved my baby so much and wanted to see her again, she figured she'd let her come with her. I remember being in literal tears talking to them. I had just played my husband and I's favorite song, but my sister documented my crying as emotional instability. Claire commented to my sister that surely developing around such grief wasn't healthy for a baby. My sister nodded and said she would note it down. They left again, this time making comments about how I should seriously consider giving my baby up. I remember wanting to scream, but I was so grief-stricken I could barely think. Next thing I knew, I found myself hearing my sister talk about Claire's baby plans during a family dinner. She was describing her new nursery with excitement. She mentioned the perfect pink walls and the butterfly mobile that played Mozart. Then she talked about the soft gray elephant rocker. My blood went cold. Those were my daughter's exact things. The pink she loved, the specific mobile, the elephant my husband bought before he died. That's when I snapped. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at the mirror. I knew what I had to do. I went home and researched CPS protocols that very week. Then I called my sister's supervisor about conflicts of interest. I mentioned the self-assigned case and unauthorized visits with Claire. I gave specific dates and details. 3 weeks passed in silence. No visits, no calls. My sister missed 2 Sunday dinners. I started to think maybe something happened. Then my door crashed open one Tuesday. My sister and Claire stormed in screaming. My sister yelled at me that she had lost her job, that she couldn't take care of her husband anymore. Claire was in tears herself. Her eyes were black like her mascara had been smudged. She screamed at the same time as my sister, saying that she had been blacklisted from every adoption agency. Now she would never be able to have kids. They were both absolutely irate. But the thing was, as they ranted and their voices merged into one incoherent temper tantrum, I couldn't help it. A small smile formed on my face. That's when they saw my expression change. "You think this is funny?" they yelled basically in unison. I went to backtrack and tell them no, but before I even could, they looked at each other and suddenly bolted up the stairs towards my daughter's room. I ran after them as fast as I could. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. My legs felt like jelly, but adrenaline pushed me forward. They reached the nursery door before me and Claire grabbed the handle. I managed to push between them and block the door with my body. My sister tried to shove me aside, but I held firm. I could feel the door handle digging into my back. I told them to get out of my house immediately. My voice was stronger than I expected. Claire started screaming that I ruined her life, that I took away her only chance at being a mother. Her face was twisted with rage and desperation. My sister was yelling over her about how I destroyed her career, how her husband Frank had a disability, and she was the only income. I kept my back against the door and reached for my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to unlock it. I told them I was calling 911 if they didn't leave. That seemed to snap them back to reality a bit. My sister grabbed Claire's arm and pulled her back. They both glared at me with pure hatred. The look in their eyes was terrifying. My sister said this wasn't over, that I'd regret what I did. Then they left, slamming the front door so hard a picture fell off the wall. It was my wedding photo. The glass cracked right across my husband's face. I immediately called the police to report the incident. My voice was shaking as I explained to the dispatcher. 2 officers came and took my statement. They were professional, but seemed skeptical at first. I explained everything about my sister's corruption and the attempted forced entry to my daughter's room. They said they'd file a report, but since they'd used a key and hadn't actually broken anything or committed a crime, there wasn't much they could do. I asked about a restraining order, but they said family disputes were complicated. They suggested I change my locks and install security cameras. One of them, an older officer with kind eyes, quietly told me to document everything and stay vigilant. After they left, I called a locksmith right away. While waiting for him, I checked on my daughter. She was still napping peacefully in her crib, completely unaware of the chaos. Her little chest rose and fell steadily. I sat in her room just watching her breathe, tears streaming down my face. The locksmith arrived within an hour and changed all my locks. He was efficient and didn't ask questions about why I needed it done so urgently. I also ordered security cameras online with next-day delivery, choosing a system that would send alerts to my phone. That night, I barely slept. Every little noise made me jump. I kept checking the doors and windows, testing the new locks. Around 3 a.m., I heard a car engine outside. My bedroom faced the street and the sound was unmistakable. I peeked through the curtains and saw my sister's blue Honda parked across the street. She was just sitting there, watching my house. The streetlight illuminated her face enough that I could see she was staring directly at my window. I took photos with my phone for evidence, making sure to get her license plate. After about an hour, she finally drove away. I stayed at the window for another 30 minutes, making sure she didn't come back. The next morning, I installed the security cameras myself. It took most of the day, but I got them covering every entrance. The instructions were complicated, but I was determined. I also called my mom to tell her what happened. At first, she laughed, thinking I was exaggerating. She didn't believe me at first, said there must be some misunderstanding, that my sister would never do something like that. I told her about the CPS visits and Claire's nursery plans. I explained how they'd tried to force their way into my daughter's room. Mom went quiet for a long time. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then she said she'd talk to my sister. I begged her not to, told her it would only make things worse. But she insisted family problems should be solved within the family. She hung up before I could argue further, leaving me with a growing sense of dread about what would happen next. I should have known Mom would make things worse. She always had a blind spot when it came to my sister. 2 days later, my doorbell rang during breakfast. Through the peephole, I saw Mom standing there with my sister. My stomach dropped. I didn't open the door. I told them through the intercom to leave. Mom started crying, saying she just wanted us to talk things out. That family shouldn't fight like this. My sister stood behind her with this smug look. I could see it even through the fisheye lens. I told them I had nothing to say, and if they didn't leave, I'd call the police. Mom begged me to just let them in for 5 minutes, said she'd driven all this way. I stayed firm, and eventually they left, but I knew this was far from over. That afternoon, I got a call from my daughter's pediatrician's office. They said they needed to reschedule her appointment. I was confused because we didn't have one scheduled. The receptionist insisted we did, that someone had called to book it. She checked her notes and said my sister had called on my behalf. My blood ran cold. I told her to cancel it immediately and remove my sister from any authorized list. She seemed confused, but agreed. I also called my insurance company and put a note on my file that only I could make changes. The representative was helpful and added extra security questions. Then I called the daycare I'd been considering for when I returned to work. Sure enough, someone claiming to be me had called asking about their policies. They'd asked specific questions about pickup authorization and custody documentation. I explained the situation, and they promised to flag my file. The next few days were quiet, but I couldn't relax. I kept checking the cameras obsessively. Every car that drove by made me tense. I started keeping a journal of everything that happened, dates and times and details. My daughter seemed to sense my anxiety. She was fussier than usual, harder to get down for naps. I tried to keep our routine normal, but it was exhausting being hypervigilant. I moved her crib away from the window, started closing all the blinds at sunset, even ordered groceries online to avoid leaving the house. The delivery driver must have thought I was paranoid, the way I checked through the peephole before opening the door. Then Friday came. I was giving my daughter a bath when my phone started blowing up. Text after text from family members. My aunt, my cousins, even my dad's sister who lived 3 states away. They were all asking variations of the same thing. Was I okay? Did I need help? Was it true I was having a breakdown? I called my aunt first, my hands shaking as I dried them on a towel. She said my sister had called everyone, told them I was suffering from severe postpartum depression, that I was paranoid and delusional, that I'd accused her of trying to steal my baby and gotten her fired over nothing. My aunt said my sister sounded so concerned, so worried about me. She'd begged family members to check on me, to convince me to get help. I tried to explain the truth, but I could hear the doubt in my aunt's voice. She kept saying things like, grief can do strange things, and there's no shame in needing help. I spent the next hour fielding calls, each one more frustrating than the last. My cousin Walter was the worst. He straight up told me I sounded crazy, that my sister would never do something like that maybe I should consider checking myself into somewhere for a while, for my daughter's sake. I hung up on him. By the time I got my daughter out of the bath and dressed, I had 17 missed calls. I turned off my phone. I couldn't deal with it anymore. But turning off my phone meant I missed the security camera alert. I only saw it later when I checked the app before bed. The footage showed my sister at my back door around 8 p.m. She was trying different keys in the lock. None worked thanks to the new locks, but she tried for almost 10 minutes. Then she disappeared from view. I checked the other cameras and found her at my basement window, pushing at it, testing it. My heart was racing as I watched her circle my house like a predator. I called 911 immediately, told them someone was trying to break into my house and I had video evidence. They dispatched a unit, but by the time they arrived, my sister was gone. The officers were the same ones from before. They watched the footage on my phone and agreed it was concerning. The older one said this was enough for a restraining order. He gave me the paperwork and explained the process, said to file it first thing Monday morning at the courthouse. He also suggested I stay somewhere else for the weekend, just to be safe. But where could I go? Most of my family thought I was crazy now. My husband's family lived across the country. I decided to just barricade myself in and wait for Monday. Saturday was hell. My sister showed up 3 different times. First at 7 a.m., ringing the doorbell nonstop. Then around noon, I caught her on camera trying to look through my mail slot. The third time was after dark. She brought Claire with her. They stood in my driveway talking and pointing at the house. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was aggressive. Claire kept gesturing at the windows. At one point, my sister picked up a rock from my garden. I thought she was going to throw it, but Claire stopped her. They argued for a bit, then left. I saved all the footage to multiple multiple places, emailed copies to myself. I even uploaded them to a cloud service I'd never used before, just to have backups. Sunday morning, my mom showed up alone. She looked tired, older somehow. I watched her on the camera for 5 minutes before she even rang the bell. She just stood there, looking at my house like she'd never seen it before. When she finally rang, I answered through the intercom. She asked if she could please come in, said she'd come alone, and promised my sister didn't know she was here. Something in her voice made me believe her. I let her in, but kept my daughter in her high chair where I could see her. Mom sat at my kitchen table and started crying. Real tears, not the manipulative kind. She said she'd found something, that she'd gone to my sister's house to talk to her. My sister wasn't home, but Frank was. He was confused about the whole situation. Didn't know my sister had lost her job. She'd been pretending to go to work every day. Mom found papers in their home office, adoption papers with Claire's name on them, but also bank statements showing large deposits from Claire to my sister's account. Payments dating back months, all marked as consultation fees. Mom pulled out her phone and showed me photos she'd taken of the documents. The adoption papers were partially filled out. In the section for the child's information, someone had started writing my daughter's name before crossing it out. There were printed emails between my sister and Claire discussing the plan. One mentioned waiting for the right opportunity. Another talked about building a case slowly. The most damning one was from Claire saying she'd pay double if my sister could make it happen before the baby turned 1. My mom was shaking as she showed me. She kept apologizing, saying she should have believed me, that she knew my sister could be difficult but never imagined this. I asked if she'd confronted my sister. She said no, she'd just taken the photos and left. She was scared of what my sister might do if she knew. I told Mom about the break-in attempts and showed her the security footage. Her face went white. She kept saying "my God" over and over. I explained about the restraining order I'd file Monday. Mom said she'd come with me, that she'd testify if needed. She also said Frank had seemed genuinely confused and upset, that maybe he could help too. We spent the next hour making a plan. Mom would go back and talk to Frank, try to get him on our side. I'd file the restraining order and contact a lawyer. We'd gather all the evidence and make sure my sister couldn't hurt anyone else. Mom hugged me before leaving, a real hug like when I was little. She promised she'd fix this, that she'd make it right. That night I actually slept a little. Having Mom on my side made me feel less alone, but I woke up at 4 a.m. to my phone ringing. It was Mom, hysterical. She said my sister had shown up at her house screaming, accused her of betraying her, of choosing me over her. Mom had locked herself in her bedroom and called me. I could hear my sister in the background, banging on the door, yelling about how Mom had ruined everything, how she'd been trying to help me by giving my daughter a better life, that I was too unstable to be a mother, that Claire would have been perfect. Mom was crying so hard I could barely understand her. I told her to hang up and call 911. She did, and I spent the next hour pacing my house, waiting to hear back. Finally, Mom texted that the police had come and my sister had left, but not before telling Mom she was dead to her, that she'd chosen wrong and would regret it. Mom was shaken but safe. She said the police took a report and suggested she might want a restraining order too. I told her to come to my house, but she said she needed some time, needed to process everything. I understood, but worried about her being alone. She promised to lock up tight and call if anything happened. I spent the rest of the night watching my security cameras and jumping at every shadow. My daughter woke up twice, probably sensing my anxiety. I held her close and promised I'd keep her safe, no matter what it took. Monday morning came and I was at the courthouse when it opened. Mom met me there looking exhausted but determined. We filed for the restraining order together. The clerk was helpful, walking us through the paperwork. I provided all the evidence, the security footage, the photos of the documents Mom found, the records of the fake appointments. The judge would review it and make a decision within a few days. We also stopped by a family lawyer's office. The consultation was expensive but worth it. The lawyer, a woman named Dorothy, listened to our story with growing concern. She said we had a strong case for harassment and attempted kidnapping. She also mentioned my sister could face serious charges for her abuse of power as a CPS worker. We retained her services and she said she'd start working on it immediately. On the drive home, Mom told me about Frank. She'd called him that morning and he was devastated. He had no idea about any of it. My sister had been lying to him for months. He thought the money from Claire was from a promotion at work. He'd found more evidence after Mom left. Receipts for baby items hidden in the garage. A folder full of photos of my daughter that my sister had taken during her visits. Even a forged document trying to transfer my daughter's medical records. Frank said he was leaving my sister, that he couldn't believe he'd been married to someone capable of this. He offered to help however he could. Mom gave me his number and said he seemed genuine. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet, but appreciated the support. When we got back to my house, there was a package on my doorstep. No delivery truck in sight. I approached it carefully while Mom waited in the car. It was addressed to my daughter. No return address. I brought it inside and opened it carefully, half expecting something terrible. Inside was a baby doll, but not just any doll. It looked exactly like my daughter. Same hair color, same eyes, wearing an outfit identical to one she had. There was a note in Claire's handwriting. "Since you stole my baby, I made my own. Enjoy your time with her while it lasts." My hands were shaking as I showed Mom. She immediately called the police. They came and took the doll and note as evidence, said it would help with the restraining order. The officer also mentioned this was escalating and to be extra careful. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Usually I don't answer those, but something made me pick up. It was a woman named Julia who said she used to work with my sister. She'd heard about about my sister losing her job and wanted to reach out. She said my sister had tried to do something similar before. About 3 years ago, there was another single mom my sister had targeted, but that woman had moved states before anything happened. Julia said she'd always suspected something was off but never had proof. She offered to write a statement about what she'd witnessed. I thanked her and gave her my lawyer's information. It felt like the pieces were coming together. More people were seeing the truth, but my sister wasn't done. That evening, I noticed a strange car parked down the street. It sat there for hours. I zoomed in with my camera and saw Claire in the driver's seat. She was just watching my house. I called the police, but she drove away before they arrived. An hour later, she was back. This pattern continued all night. She'd park, watch for a while, leave when I called the police, then return. The officers were getting frustrated, but said without the restraining order, there wasn't much they could do. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. My daughter could sense the tension. She was clingy and wouldn't let me put her down. I carried her everywhere, even to the bathroom. Tuesday brought a new horror. I woke up to find my garbage cans tipped over and trash spread across my lawn. But that wasn't the worst part. Mixed in with the garbage were photos. Dozens of photos of my husband, our wedding photos, vacation pictures, even intimate moments from our home. Photos that had been in albums in my closet. I ran inside to check, and sure enough, the albums were gone. But I'd locked everything, changed all the locks. How did they get in? Then I remembered the basement window my sister had been testing. I ran downstairs and found it broken, glass on the floor. They'd come in while I slept, while my daughter slept. The violation made me physically sick. I threw up in the basement sink, my whole body shaking. The police came again. This time they took it very seriously. The broken window was clear evidence of breaking and entering. They dusted for fingerprints and took photos. One officer stayed with me while another canvassed the neighborhood. A neighbor, Aaron from 2 houses down, had security footage that caught 2 figures approaching my house around 3 a.m. You couldn't see faces clearly, but one was definitely my sister's build. The officers said this was enough to arrest them if they could find them. They put out a BOLO, be on the lookout, for both my sister and Claire. I spent the day cleaning up the photos, each one a stab to my heart. They'd even taken the last photo of my husband and me together, taken just a week before he died. Dorothy called with good news. The judge had expedited the restraining order based on the evidence. It would be served within 24 hours. She'd also filed criminal charges for harassment, stalking, breaking and entering, and attempted kidnapping. She said my sister and Claire were looking at serious jail time, but they had to find them first. Mom came over to stay with me. She helped me board up the basement window and clean up the rest of the mess. We installed extra locks on all the windows, motion sensor lights for the yard. Mom even bought an air horn to keep by the bed. We were preparing for a siege. That night, we took turns keeping watch. Mom insisted I get some sleep, but I could barely close my eyes. Wednesday morning, Frank called. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. He said my sister had emptied their bank accounts, taken everything and disappeared. He'd come home from work to find their house ransacked. She'd taken her clothes, important documents, and all the cash they'd saved. Left him a note saying he'd chosen wrong by talking to Mom, that he'd regret betraying her. He was at the police station filing a report. He also mentioned finding something disturbing. My sister had a storage unit he didn't know about. He'd found the key and gone to check it. Inside were baby supplies, enough for years. Clothes in multiple sizes, toys, furniture, all pink, all matching the things in my daughter's nursery. There were also binders full of notes about my family, our routines, my husband's death, my daughter's medical information. She'd been planning this for longer than we thought. The police got a warrant for the storage unit, and Frank gave them the key. They found even more evidence there. Forged documents, fake IDs, even a wig that looked like my hair. The detective called to update me. He said they were taking this very seriously now. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was an organized conspiracy. They were working with other jurisdictions to track my sister and Claire down. He suggested I might want to stay somewhere else until they were caught. But where? Mom's house wasn't safe. Hotels felt too exposed. In the end, Frank offered his house. Said he was staying with his brother anyway. It felt weird, but Dorothy said it might be unexpected enough to work. So that afternoon, Mom and I packed up essentials and went to my sister's house. The irony wasn't lost on me. Being in my sister's space was surreal. Everything was so normal looking. Family photos on the walls, including ones of me, her wedding china in the cabinet. But then I'd notice things. A drawer full of my daughter's photos, a calendar with my daughter's doctor appointments marked, a notebook with custody strategies written on the cover. I couldn't bring myself to read it. We stayed in the guest room, pushing the dresser in front of the door each night. My daughter seemed calmer here, maybe because it was new. She actually slept through the night for the first time in days. I lay awake listening to every sound, but it was quiet. The calm felt wrong somehow, like the eye of a storm. Thursday passed without incident. No sightings, no break-ins, no creepy packages. The police called to say they'd tracked my sister's credit card to a gas station 2 towns over, but she was gone by the time they arrived. The trail was cold after that. Dorothy filed for emergency custody orders, just in case my sister tried to claim any rights to my daughter. She also started the process of getting a permanent protective order, one that would last years, not months. Mom and I spent the day going through my sister's house, looking for more evidence. We found receipts for the baby doll. Claire had commissioned it from an artist who made realistic dolls. It had cost $2,000. The order was placed 3 months ago, long before I'd reported my sister. Friday morning, everything changed. I woke up to my phone ringing. It was the daycare I'd contacted weeks ago. They said someone had just tried to pick up my daughter. I explained my daughter wasn't enrolled there. The director said she knew, but a woman claimed claiming to be me had shown up with documentation. When they'd asked for ID, the woman had gotten agitated and left. They had her on security camera. It was Claire, wearing a wig and clothes similar to what I usually wore. The daycare had called the police and they were reviewing the footage. This meant they were still in town, still trying. The detective called an hour later. They'd gotten Claire. She was at a motel on the outskirts of town. She'd been arrested and was being questioned. But my sister wasn't with her. Claire wasn't talking, demanding a lawyer. The relief of Claire being caught was short-lived. That afternoon, as Mom was making lunch, I heard a noise from the garage. I grabbed the air horn and crept to the door. Through the window, I could see the garage door was open, and there was my sister, going through boxes, looking for something. I whispered to Mom to call 911 and stay with my daughter. Then I did something stupid. I confronted her, opened the door, and told her the police were coming. She spun around, her face twisted with rage. She screamed that I'd ruined everything, that she'd worked so hard to give my daughter a better life, that I was selfish and unstable and didn't deserve to be a mother. I kept my distance, the air horn ready. Asked her why she thought she had any right to my child. She laughed, but it was bitter and broken. Said I'd never understand what it was like to want something so badly and be denied. To watch unfit parents keep their kids while good people like Claire suffered. She'd just been trying to fix things, to make it right. I told her she was sick, that she needed help. That made her angrier. She started moving toward me and I blasted the air horn. The sound was deafening in the garage. She covered her ears and stumbled back. I kept blasting it, backing toward the door. She tried to grab me, but I dodged. We did this strange dance, me with the air horn, her trying to get close. Then I heard the sirens. Her face went white. She looked around wildly, then ran for her car, but the police were already pulling up. She tried to run on foot, but they caught her in the neighbor's yard. I watched them arrest her from the doorway. She kept screaming that I'd stolen her life, that I'd pay for this, that she'd never stop trying. The officers had to physically restrain her. One of them came to check on me, said I'd done good keeping her occupied, that the air horn was smart. They took her away, and I finally felt like I could breathe. Mom came out with my daughter, who was crying from all the noise. I held them both, and we just stood there in the driveway. Neighbors had come out to watch. Erin gave me a thumbs up. An older woman I'd never met brought over cookies later, said she was proud of me for protecting my baby. The support felt good after weeks of feeling alone. That night, Dorothy called with updates. Both my sister and Claire were being held without bail. The charges were serious: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, breaking and entering, stalking, harassment, fraud, and more. Claire had broken down and confessed everything. She'd paid my sister $50,000 over 6 months. They'd planned to take my daughter and flee the state. Claire had a house ready in Arizona under a fake name. My sister had used her CPS access to create fake documentation showing I was unfit. The plan had been to use that to justify taking my daughter, then disappear. My husband's death had been the opportunity they'd waited for. They thought grief would make me weak, make me easier to break. The trial date was set for 3 months out. Dorothy said we had an airtight case, but I still worried. My sister had always been good at talking her way out of things. But then more people started coming forward. That woman Julia who'd called me, she had emails from my sister discussing placement strategies for kids whose parents were vulnerable. Another former coworker, Stephanie, said my sister had bragged about the money she made on the side. Even some parents came forward saying my sister had threatened to take their kids if they didn't pay her. The case was bigger than just me. Frank filed for divorce and offered to testify. He'd found more evidence in their house, including a second phone my sister used to communicate with Claire. The texts on it were damning. Detailed discussions about my daughter's routines, when I was most vulnerable, how to break me down. One text from Claire said, "I can't wait to hold my baby girl." My sister had replied, "Soon. She's almost broken." Reading those made me sick. Frank apologized over and over, said he should have seen the signs. I told him it wasn't his fault. My sister had fooled everyone for years. Mom and I moved back to my house once they installed a new security system. The first night back was hard. Every shadow looked like my sister. Every noise made me jump, but my daughter was happy to be home. She crawled around exploring like nothing had happened. Kids are resilient like that. Mom stayed for 2 weeks, helping me get back to normal. We repainted the nursery, bought new locks for the windows, even got a dog. A big German Shepherd mix named Buddy from the shelter. He was gentle with my daughter, but barked at any stranger who came near the house. The pre-trial hearings were rough. Seeing my sister in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs was surreal. She'd lost weight and her hair was greasy, but her eyes still had that anger. She stared at me the whole time. Claire looked worse. She was crying before they even brought her in. Her lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, but Dorothy said no way. We wanted the maximum sentence. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge seemed disgusted by the whole thing, especially when he saw the storage unit photos and the doll. He denied bail again and set strict rules for the trial. 3 weeks before the trial, I got a call from the prosecutor. My sister wanted to make a deal. She'd plead guilty to everything if I'd agree to let her have supervised visits with my daughter when she got out. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. The prosecutor said he'd figured that would be my response, but had to ask. I said she'd never see my daughter again, not if I had anything to say about it. He said good, that's what he'd hoped. The trial would go forward. My sister could rot in jail thinking about what she'd lost. Mom and I spent days preparing my testimony with Dorothy, going over every detail, every incident. It was exhausting reliving it all, but Dorothy said my testimony would be crucial. I needed to show the judge and jury how calculated this was, how long they'd planned it, how they'd tried to use my grief against me. We practiced until I could tell it without crying. I needed to be strong, show them I was a good mother who'd protected her child. The crying could come later, in private. The trial started on a Monday. The courthouse was packed. Apparently the story had made local news. CPS worker attempts to steal sister's baby was the headline. I tried to ignore the cameras outside. Inside, I sat with Mom and Frank and Dorothy. My daughter was with a trusted babysitter, Jessie, who'd been thoroughly vetted. I'd even given Jessie a panic button that would alert the police. Maybe overkill, but I wasn't taking chances. Not anymore. Claire's lawyer went with the mental illness defense, said she'd been driven crazy by infertility, that my sister had manipulated her. The prosecutor destroyed that pretty quick, showed the texts where Claire was clearly the instigator, the payments she'd made, the house in Arizona she'd bought. This wasn't some breakdown. It was a crime. Claire cried through the whole thing, kept looking at me like I should feel sorry for her. I didn't. She'd tried to steal my child. There was no forgiveness for that. My sister's lawyer tried a different approach, said she'd been trying to help, that she genuinely believed I was unfit after my husband died, that she was protecting my daughter. The prosecutor showed the evidence from the storage unit, the plans that started before my husband even died, the forged documents, the money. My sister had coached parents on what to say to keep their kids, taken bribes, destroyed families. This wasn't about helping. It was about money and control. My sister kept her face blank through it all, like none of it mattered. When I testified, I kept my eyes on the jury, told them about finding my husband dead from a heart attack at 32, how my sister had shown up 2 weeks later with Claire, how they documented normal grief as instability, the nursery conversation at Mom's house, the break-ins, the photos scattered on my lawn, the doll. My voice stayed steady even when jurors looked horrified. One woman was crying by the time I finished. The defense tried to make me look unstable during cross-examination, but I had dates, times, evidence. Dorothy had prepared me well. They couldn't shake my story because it was true. Frank testified about finding the storage unit, the second phone, the lies about losing her job. He broke down talking about how my sister had used his disability to manipulate him, said if he'd known, he'd have stopped her, protected me and my daughter. His testimony was powerful because he'd loved my sister, still wore his wedding ring, but he chose truth over loyalty. That had to mean something to the jury. The woman Julia testified about the pattern she'd seen. Other parents my sister had targeted, always vulnerable ones, single parents, those dealing with loss or illness. Stephanie talked about the bribes, even showed bank records she'd kept. She'd been building her own case for years, but needed someone to come forward first. I'd been that someone. Mom testified last, talked about finding the papers at my sister's house, the adoption documents with my daughter's name. She cried talking about choosing between her daughters, but said protecting her granddaughter came first, always. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, guilty on all counts for both of them. My sister got 15 years, Claire got 12. They'd be registered as child predators when they got out, could never work with kids again, never adopt. The judge called their actions a grotesque abuse of power and trust, said they'd preyed on a grieving mother and tried to steal her child. That society couldn't tolerate such evil. My sister finally showed emotion then. Her face crumpled and she screamed that I'd destroyed her life. The bailiffs had to drag her out. Claire just sobbed.